Hello and welcome on this edition or episode of Fellowship of the Swords. We're going to explore one of the most interesting and enticing, and today it's considered the most sexy myth in Hollywood, the vampire. So welcome today, myself, Farah Deel, and my husband,
Kenneth, Deel.
No, we're not vampires. As we talk about the myth of the blood-drinking, blood-sucking vampire. So, shall we start with some history, or should we start with today's media present? What would you like to start with? There's
A little bit of the history
much.
first. You can mention, about this this queen or whoever used to bathe in virgin's blood. Vladimir Dracula. We'll start with, since that's the most common one. And he, just a guy with a family, and he made a pact with Satan after his kids got killed. He turned to the dark side. And they called him Vlad the Impaler. He would take his victims' heads that, he captured and caught in the war, and put them on a pike. Did he start drinking blood and all that stuff? There's just no, apart from his satanic ritual, whatever he made this pact with Satan to be able to conquer his enemies. Like I said, it's a really tragic tale, because I remember telling people, how far is everybody from losing your family like Job and then going the opposite direction that Job did not go? And so it began there, but it's very misinforming. And then there's the one who actually was a lot more.
There's actually older tales in Dracula of people that rise from the dead and drink blood. And a lot of this superstition came from a very superstitious time when shallow graves were dug and a human would be dug back up. And it was called the death mask. They didn't understand it at the time. When somebody was buried, they didn't sew your lips together. So sometimes when they unburied them, they were like, and it looked like, they had these claws coming out of their face. And then, of course, their nails grew a little bit. And they thought that there had to be a reason.
Hair.
That's right, and their hair. So they thought these people rose from the dead, and they must have been drinking blood because... Now, remember, this is superstitious, thousands of years ago time. We're talking, animals disappeared, livestock disappeared on a regular basis. If there was more than normal, instead of blaming their neighbors or instead of blaming a wolf, they would dig somebody up that was particularly evil in the village and find out, oh, yes, and then they would literally, in order to commit them to their grave, stake them through the heart to the ground, so that they could not get up out of their grave.
Yeah, through the coffin, like pinning them in.
Well, precisely.
Yeah.
And then, if it continued, they would literally burn the bodies. And this all arrived from superstition. Now, I really have to say that poor Vlad the Impaler got a very, very bad rap. There were also rumors of Egyptian god that drank blood, which I'm not familiar with.
An exact name, I guess, not important.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly, because it's not important.
Yeah.
I don't have it at the top of my mind. But since we're on the subject of popular vampires and what most people think of as a vampire, they think Vlad the Impaler was a bad guy, and he really wasn't. He loved his country. He was the youngest child, the only one that actually survived a raid on the castle. His brother took power. His family was murdered horribly. He survived in a prison. And I believe he escaped twice. He brought his country up. The country loved him. He actually turned the tables on everybody and we're talking noble people and other kingdoms that had betrayed him, and he had them all publicly impaled. He got so upset. I think this was the second time that he was kidnapped, when his wife committed suicide, believing that he was dead. I believe that's part of the lore. But today he's considered one of the country's savior. He is considered one of the supreme lieutenants, generals, just like Alexander the Great is. And, of course, in, was it Mary Shelley's Frankenstein? No, it wasn't Mary Shelley's. Bram Stoker was one of the most recent to write about the whole legend of Vlad the Impaler. And it brought to mind this very, shall we say, unrequited love, a fantasy fairy tale of beauty and loss, and it took what, the Nosferatu, or there's been all kinds of sorts of names for these bloodsuckers and blood drinkers that are believed to come into your home, mesmerize you with their eyes, and then you hold perfectly still, while they suck the life out of you by drinking all your blood. There's no basis in fact for this myth or legend. There are cults.
Not the origins, anyway.
There are blood cults. There are blood sacrifices. And we'll get into talking about cults in another one. The actual myth of the vampire is mostly myth. It has been romanticized. It's no longer an ugly vampire. He's this, I can't think of anybody, I don't know, maybe people like Brad Pitt, just a very virile looking, sexy man that is, going to sweep you off and make you his vampire mistress for life. That's basically, arisen from the, what Father Ripperger calls of out of order eros. The imbalance of where love is directed. So now, they've got these teenagers watching these kids. I can't think of the series about these young vampires, and they're all sexy and they're all adorable.
Twilight.
Yeah, and everybody wants to be made love to by
and
a
True
vampire.
Blood, True Blood, the copy TV series.
Yes. And it's it's the forbidden fruit. It's the disorder of eros. It is
the bad
wanting
boy, the new bad boy.
Precisely what you can't have, and that's the attraction to the vampire. Something that because it kind of too. It's very psychological.
Yeah.
We all want to believe that, or we all want to buy into. Most humanity wants to buy into the fact that yes, we are redeemable, which of course we have already been redeemed, and that we're so terrible that maybe by becoming terrible we'll be acceptable because the terrible will love us. I don't understand that kind of psychology, but that seems to be what they're marketing.
It's in the DSM-5. I just know.
I know.
Now the connection is when people confuse the lure with
yes, they do.
old hag attacks, vampire-like attacks that happen from succubus and incubus.
That's totally different.
Yeah, and the shadow figure, which causes sleep paralysis,
yes, completely
crushing weight
different.
on your chest. They absorb or your life force, and this one's probably the closest one. So here's an example right here. So somebody gets up in the morning and they actually sleep until 11 o'clock, and the other members of the household, say, "You look terrible," and they got dark circles under their eyes.
Yeah,
and they said, "I had some strange dream or whatever," and they might share with them, and they probably usually don't the first time, as in this one. And then this repeats, and they're getting their life force, as they say, like drawn from them, just like the vampire lore. Remember, you would go to sleep a few times, you get bit 3 times, you'd be dead the next morning, and a vampire after they buried you. Well, they come down, they look bad. They use that symptom, for the word hag-ridden, like, well, you're looking hag-ridden this morning, and that's where it comes from. The word hag-ridden, that a hag actually got on top of your chest and was crushed, kind of pinning you down, and then drawing your life force out. And if it happened enough, they would find the person dead. They would start to look like they're losing more and more energy, like they come down with some mysterious illness. And if someone didn't believe it was a spirit, they would have been sending the doctor over, putting leeches on them and whatever, which I think is more absurd than assuming it's an evil spirit.
That's more of a blood draw.
Yeah. So, they're sucking the life force, not the blood, out of the victim. I think is more with a lower. And then, what they did in some of those cases is they went into the village and they go, "Oh, Dr. Madison, he was suspicious, of doing the black arts." So they go and open his grave up and they drive the stake in there, just like the vampire lure you're talking about, because they bought into some of that stuff.
And you had mentioned, women that bathe in blood. That's going to be a different one because those are...
that's not a vampire.
No, that's not a vampire myth. That is basically, a bloodlust, blood pack. I mean, there's all kinds of things we can talk about. But the vampire lore is basically a myth based on a lot of factual events that have happened that appear to, give a human a superstitious or supernatural kind of class within a village, and to believe that they have powers that they don't. Vampires are believed, to be able to mesmerize you and to get you to do just about everything. Superhuman strength, no heart. And if they have no heart, what are they doing with the blood they're drinking? They have no. I mean, didn't everybody ever think of this? Why are they sucking your blood if it can't go anywhere?
Well, I guess this kind of goes something else too. Is the Satanists seek sexual pleasure? That there is a fact, and that one of the
Actually, it's
gifts you
sexual
get can
domination.
manipulate, looking into their eyes and do sort of like a hypnosis, just like Dracula.
It's mesmerization, yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably where that comes from a little bit, if it's a person. But the lure really seems to be more. And the other one is that some witches confessed, and that they can do just like the saints
Under direct
by
torture.
locating.
Under direct torture. They confessed a lot of things.
They bilocated and attacked somebody. Now, Padre Pio delivered communion to a woman 2 hours away who was on her deathbed, and he could not have traveled there before she died. So he showed up there, gave her communion, gave her last rites.
Yes.
And that's happened more than once. And God has his saints with special gifts, just like the devil will put upon, some witches or whatever to be able to astral travel and project themselves to do evil directly. And they even see the person, even if it's just a silhouette, not necessarily with a pointed hat.
So back to the vampirism of today, if you're a parent, I do want to warn you, because I've had a lot of experience in a lot of cases that due to the popular lore, and I'm talking 10, 15, 20 years ago, a lot of younger people are experimenting with sucking and drinking each other's blood. I know this may sound gross and stupid, and why would anybody do that? Be aware of what your children, I don't care if your children are 12 or if they're 20 or they're 30, be aware of if they need you, if they're looking into things that look dark, sound dark, be open, don't judge, listen to them closely, because if there is no relationship with you, you can't help redirect them and bring them into a common ground. And that's the most important thing that stands between a child being enticed to drink blood off of another person that cuts themselves, or to store blood. Like, remember Angelina Jolie made it so popular to carry around a vial of blood? Kids still do that. And it's only out of curiosity. There isn't any deep underground club with kids right now. It's a curiosity. Let's, go the limit. Why just have sexual intercourse? Let's drink each other's blood. And it's a lot more common than people think, just like cutting is more common. And in a sense, I've spoken with youth ministers that think that, in a sense, cutting, it ties into the vampire myth, because cutting is such a release. It's such an endorphin release for the person cutting themselves, because the pain they feel, the emotion and physical pain they feel, is so incredibly bad. And if you know your child is going through this, please get them help. Please get them a pastor, a therapist, whatever you can do, because any sort of disordered self-hurt is only going to escalate and drive everybody away from the person. So
got to watch out with the kids and so forth. Even a friend of yours, that they're not drawn into the glamour, the glitz,
the cult of vampirism,
the
and how
romance.
beautiful it is.
Yeah, they've turned it into something it's not. They just romanticize it so much. It's still dark.
It's not really the way life is.
Yeah.
And I think that about wraps it up for this episode, and we want to remind you that the battle's already been won, Satan's already been crushed. Ken and I, we're here to help you fight that fight today. So if you have any questions, have any vampires in your family, we'd love to shoot photos, as they can't get their photo taken. Give us a call, please, at 573-990-1333, and don't hesitate to look for us on Facebook, Kenneth, Farah, Deel, Deel. We are The Real Deals. You can find us also on the website at
www.swordsofstmichael.org. CatholicDemonologist.com is an alternate that has our books and our other resources, and rosaries, heirloom equality, and pendants.
And thank you so much. Have a good night.